I'm Dane Rose, and after working with different site engineers in my capacity as a site developer, landscaper, and for a brief period as a general contractor in the Seattle area, I want to outline what I see as kind of the big strokes of problems and potential community value around this property. So let's start with this road. First of all, there are some monitoring ports around right up here and another one here. And the reason for that is that this slope here is a, basically a 10-foot deep layer of asphalt. So this is a certain amount of mismanagement on the road department. And as a result, there is a continual slippage. Like you'll see little cracks, like you can see one. Well, I guess you can't fully see it, but there's little cracks as the front part of the road very slowly, is moving down the hill. And they'll come out and they'll just put a new fresh coat of asphalt to, fill in the low spot. And they've been doing that for years. And they can just go right on, ahead doing that. It's not a big, threat or issue. But they do have a one-way street. So if I can back out all the way here, this is a one-way street. And because of that, there are 1 or 2 car accidents every single year. That's one of the neighbors that I interviewed. I was curious, like, how often is there a fender bender where those, and basically where a two-way road becomes a one-way road through the length of this property. And, so that's, I don't know, maybe $25,000 a year in kind of public nuisance. It's also narrow for people walking. That's the narrow point. And it's dangerous, which is why they've, put up these little, things here after I bought the property. So what's in the public's interest? Now, I've met with the road department, and what they basically said was, yes, there is a case for definite public interest, but you'd have to engage with the supervisors. And so there is a supervisor, for this area. And I haven't had this meeting yet, but it's what I will do next if, I get around to it before the property sells. This was going to be a project that I did for myself. In general, building in Marin is a little bit of a runaround. And I've known that from my clients. I've known that compared, to other areas. And I find that particularly irritating, when public agencies spend tax money to make things more difficult rather than to help. And so, that's like, how much of that do I want to stomach is, I guess, the tension point. And, as I've moved to a development project in Costa Rica, that was selected for the opposite. Like, you can pretty much do whatever you want without being hassled. And, for someone like myself, that's a priority. But what's best for the public here, and what was going to be done with the last chief of the road department, was they had worked out a retaining wall that they were going to build. And, as is often the case with public money, they're willing to spend a lot of it rather than get creative. So their retaining wall was going to cost $680,000 and wasn't even going to make it a 2-lane road. And as a good designer, my job, anyone's job, is to get way more value for a lot less money, which is not hard when you're comparing your design with a bureaucracy of any kind. So, so what's good for the public is if this becomes a 2-lane road, number one. What's good for the road is if it is reinforced in some way with cement, which is many times stronger than asphalt. And what's good for the development of the land is if this is a 2-lane road. And the reason for that is you have to close the road. It's not a busy road. You have to close the road to develop the property if you don't make it a 2-lane road. And so my, the reality of how my engineer and I have looked at this project and looked at this, for building, is that it is far, far cheaper to stabilize the road using the house foundation as the base than it is to drill 60 feet into the hill, which was the county engineer's design. Remember, when you're spending public money, you don't really care about the cost. When you're spending your own money, it's very important. Now, if we look at, the road here, you can see that, to make this, right now it's about, 12 feet, 13 feet in diameter from here to here. And what you need is to add at least 6 feet in order to make it a 2-lane road. And once it becomes a 2-lane road, then you've got the ability to be in 1 lane with the one-way traffic happening the way it always was. And so the case for involving a supervisor is when there's a public interest that is more important than the typical building codes. And so if we look at the easiest way to both create access to the property, make it a 2-lane road, and solve, solve, a lot of the safety and drainage issues in the area, the first thing you would do is you would put, roughly 8 feet from the curb here, you would put I-beams driven down into the asphalt, right? And you'd do that the length of the property. You put down I-beams every, 4 to 6 feet. It's just fine. And the reason for that is minimal community disruption. You can drive those I-beams down in 1 to 2 days. And then that's the end of the road closure, which is, I think, a really important part of the development strategy. Because once you've got the I-beams in, you can drop pressure-treated wood in between the beams, and you've got an instant cement form. And this is great because you don't have to drop. You can get those pieces out of a pickup truck. A homeowner can do it once the initial I-beams are in. And the I-beams can go through asphalt. And they can go down, fairly deep, but they don't need to go down, very deep. We're just trying to, make something a lot stronger than this asphalt. There's very little pressure to have that tip over because most of the weight, it wants to stay stable. And just that alone, by the way, which is, a relatively inexpensive project compared to the, the county. We're talking, something under, under $50,000. Now, you can easily find companies that will drive that up, but the way I would go about it is I would I would work with the, see if the, if the county supervisor will get engaged. And usually they just take whoever nags them the most. It's not a huge project. It will save $25,000 in accidents, which is good, of course, for the environment. It will increase the safety, substantially. It will permanently fix the county's slightly, eroding road problem. It'll make a 2-lane road, which even the county's $600,000 retaining wall was not going to do, for whatever bizarre reason. They weren't going to go out that far. So this is, a very big public benefit. You have, 2 days of road closure in order to pound all the steel posts in, and or you can also auger them and cement them. That's another way. But I would do the pounding if that works, and if that can be done within the framework of the existing power lines. But either way, those are done all the time, and you can get a 40-foot I-beam that's very, very strong, and put those in. Now the next thing I would do is to pour cement, draining. The water that lands here is draining over slowly, to this side. So I would keep that tilt, go down about a foot. That also is protecting the view a little bit. So I would pour solid concrete into that entire area. Now and then I would have a temporary railing. Now you have a 2-lane road. You have a permanently fixed asphalt road. You've got a huge triangular mass of concrete that is never going to go anywhere. And you've done a huge service to the community. And you've got probably, $25,000 worth of concrete, and, another, maybe $10,000 of steel. That's $35,000. I would manage my own crew doing this, and, maybe $5,000 in labor cost, somewhere in there. This shouldn't cost that much. That's not to say that in Marin you couldn't easily spend $75,000 doing what I just outlined, but it doesn't need to if you want to be a more active manager of the project, because a pump truck, can pull up in the 2-lane area so that cars can continue to go while you're pouring the concrete. And it's a crude pour. You're not doing the final finish coat. You're just coming up to the top 4 inches. It's a monolithic pour. There's nothing that can go. There's no skill involved. You just pour it, which basically means you walk up and down with a tube and fill in this triangular gap until it's 4 inches from the top. And that's so that you can do a nice stamped concrete or, finished concrete later. But you've now got a 2-foot road with a wonderful grade, beam all along the side that's, quadrupled the slide stability. And you could just be done there, and the county could, easily do that alone. It's in county right-of-way. It's just not on their schedule. But what this gives you is now a place to work, to unload materials, to have a crane that can now sit here and take, do some of your deeper digging and augering, and, whether it's, do ramps or, I think the key thing would be to first of all know you can drive a machine up and down here with ramps. I've done it a number of times with my excavator. And so you may also, before you build this, want to drive a machine down and do the auger holes and, for the concrete for the house. Because just to give you a kind of a brief overview of the design, we're talking about this little bit here. But what's really giving it its strength in terms of from an engineering point of view are the I-beams that are coming over across here and the concrete and the pillars and the concrete poured between here. In other words, this is your engineering masterpiece that the county doesn't have access to unless you build a concrete post design for the lower floors, reinforced with concrete walls. So what I love about this design is rather than the county going down 68 feet and not getting a second lane and all of that, you can make this a 2-lane road. And then from here to here, there's a fairly big easement. So this is about 30 feet, which is your parking area. You get that for free as part of reinforcing this, which this is all an engineering grid here that is when you connect concrete between these beams, they become 5 to 10 times stronger than if they're just a single retaining wall. Right? So this wall is being supported by this, which is being supported by this. And concrete is an incredibly cheap, safe, fireproof, soundproof way to build a house. And so you're getting your soundproofing, your fireproofing, your wall costs all in one go, and your engineering all in one go, and you're getting your parking lot in one go. Now, I would carry the concrete into the floor. Like this would be a floor and that would be a floor. So this would be a 3-floor structure. The lower floors would be concrete. The top can be now a prefabrication. What I mean by that is you can design the top in a modular section. A truck can now drive onto this massive area. You can crane it off into place onto a concrete floor. And if you build this floor a little bit thick, you can actually drive a crane out here and do work on the lower parts of the property, crane things down for like the decking sections and I-beams and stuff of that nature. So, but what you're also getting is a view, right? Because you're coming up to the point where you can enjoy the view. And so there's numerous benefits, to this approach. The public has a total of 2 days of road closure rather than weeks of road closure if you keep it a single lane. You don't lose your view, which you have to do if you kind of go down the hill too far, you lose the view. And you're creating, parking at the same time that you're reinforcing this road here. And then asphalt gets poured on top of this section here, and then a nice stamped concrete gets done in this area here, and planters on this, what is basically a very large stamped concrete driveway, patio, arrival place, is attractive. This goes down maybe 4 feet from the road, so you have, it goes down a little bit over this 40-foot period, which is a nice slope and lowers the profile for people on the street. I think a flat roof is even nicer for the view of the neighbors, and it also then creates the ability for you to have a functional area on the top of the roof. However, here's where we have reality conflicting with local building protocols where they want a slope roof. But so you could even do a fake kind of roof or a slope roof up to here, have a wall come down here, then have your activities in the flat area here so that people see aesthetically the slope roof and I think a Tesla roof up here very much completes the fireproof nature of much of this, structure. Because you want something ideally that's earthquake-proof, fireproof, soundproof, isn't going to require maintenance, over time. This is the very best thing that you can imagine for a house and a foundation, but it's also, it's the best for the slope. It's the best for fires. Having this be open in here is also nice, from the neighbor point of view. And you can, of course, you can, of course, do a concrete floor like in here, and now you've got utility space under what is a waterproof concrete roof here, and the sides are open, but this can become, a workshop area out of this lower floor. So there's, a variety of approaches that can be done with that. But what I wanted to touch on is, how to navigate and access what is, a difficult access point in a way that benefits the entire neighborhood, that saves the taxpayer money, that benefits the long-term user of the home, and that makes, optimal and efficient use of the space.